Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is the most enduring and prolific comic book movie character of all time. Starting way back in the year 2000, and including cameos, Jackman has portrayed the character in 8 films to date, and he'll be reprising the role for a 9th and final time in 2017's Logan. The X-Men franchise as a whole has been pretty decent, and Jackman's Wolverine is a big reason for that, but his solo movies haven't been great, and not everything about the character is worth shouting about. And in this video, we'll take a look at just some of the reasons why. Here are 10 things Hollywood got wrong about Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. His size and stature. Before we start criticizing, we're obviously aware that the X-Men movie universe isn't the Marvel comic book universe. We don't expect everything to be the same, but there are some things that are best left unchanged. One of those things is the classic size and stature of Wolverine. Wolverine is short and stocky, end of story. Hollywood would never cast Superman or Batman as being short and fat, and the principle is exactly the same here. Wolverines are small in reality and have been known to fight off bears. The character's name is testament to the fact that tough things can come in small packages. Hugh Jackman is too tall and too lean to portray a faithful version of the character. There was an age-old rumor that Bob Hoskins was considered to play the role back in the late 1980s, and Hoskins was genuinely closer to having Wolverine's body than Jackman, which says it all. His looks. Staying with character aesthetics, Hugh Jackman just doesn't have the right look to portray a faithful version of Wolverine, and the reasons are just as important as the aforementioned size and stature of the actor and character in question. Wolverine is meant to be animalistic. He's a rough, gruff, unkempt, and untidy man whose appearance should be a far cry from the Hollywood good looks of Jackman. Hell, if Wolverine had looked like Jackman since his first appearance in the comic books, he'd have been called something like Pretty Boy or Catwalk. Simply put, Jackman's look is far too clean-cut and chiseled to be a true adaptation of Wolverine. Even his hair is far too tidy in the role of the character. His claws. This one's just weird, and really makes no sense. And while the same mistake is sometimes made in the comic books, that doesn't hide the fact that Hollywood have made the exact same one, and it's with regards to Wolverine's adamantium-coated claws. Prior to Wolverine getting his skeleton coated with adamantium in the movies, his claws were lumpy and typical of what you'd expect of bony protrusions. And yet, after the adamantium was applied, they suddenly became perfectly straight blades. How? In the comics, the appearance of the claws varies from artist to artist, but at least they're sometimes drawn how you might expect them to be. They certainly rarely look like mass-manufactured, perfectly straight knives.
You wanna shoot me? Shoot me!
He's not edgy or dangerous enough. As well as the physical characteristics of Hugh Jackman's version of Wolverine, there's also some problems with the character's personality. Wolverine might be a hero, but he's a nasty piece of work at times as well. An absolute savage, to put it mildly, and Jackman just isn't getting that across. Wolverine should be the kind of guy who walks into a bar, and not only does trouble find him, but he's also always looking for trouble. Jackman's character lacks that edge and dangerousness. His Wolverine would, more often than not, just like to sit down quietly with a beer in his hand. He suffers way too badly from what you might call nice guy syndrome. In a nutshell, that just isn't what Wolverine should be all about. His villains. In the comic books, Wolverine has some truly great villains in his rogues gallery. Omega Red, Bloodscream, Gorgon, and Cyber, for example, but these have been ignored in favor of 2 fairly poor depictions of Sabretooth, an awful depiction of Deadpool, and a very bland interpretation of the Silver Samurai. Sure, Magneto has been brilliant in the franchise, but he's hardly been specifically an enemy of Wolverine. He's been the main foe of the X-Men as a whole. Hopefully, in 2017, the Logan movie will give us great depictions of Donald Pierce and Mr. Sinister, which would somewhat make up for the poor villains Hugh Jackman's Wolverine has tended to go up against to date. Chronological errors. The X-Men movie franchise as a whole is absolutely littered with continuity errors and chronological gaffes, and its flagship character Wolverine himself certainly hasn't escaped scot-free in that regard. It would take all day and, frankly, annoy the hell out of us to list all the continuity mistakes regarding Wolverine, but here are a couple of them. In the early X-Men movies, it was established that Wolverine had been suffering from amnesia for around 15 years, placing his ailment as starting in the late 1980s, and yet Origins Wolverine shows his amnesia as starting in the 1970s? And what about how he had his adamantium claws cut off in The Wolverine, but he suddenly had them back in Days of Future Past? And that's just a couple of examples. The whole losing his memory thing. One thing that nobody really got on board with, not even the most staunch fans of Wolverine, was the magic bullet nonsense in X-Men Origins Wolverine. In order to conveniently wipe the titular character's memory, William Stryker shot him in the head with an adamantium bullet, which did exactly what he wanted it to do. How the bullet got through the adamantium on his skull in the first place is a mystery, but the fact is that Wolverine's healing power has been shown to enable him to regenerate from a skeleton and a drop of blood in the comics and still maintain his memories. movies, although the latter was admittedly when the character was powered up. How a single bullet penetrated his adamantium-laced skull and damaged his brain in just the right way to permanently delete his memories is inexplicable. His clothes can heal. Okay, so this is really just a funny inclusion to add a bit of humor, but it's still pretty ridiculous. Everyone knows that movie Wolverine possesses healing powers. It's his whole shtick after all, so his body heals rapidly from any damage it takes. He's been shot, slashed, stabbed, torn apart, and a whole lot more than that, but he always comes back fighting. But that doesn't explain how his clothes seem to magically do the same. Take the scene in X-Men The Last Stand when he's fighting Spike in the forest, which poked through his vest and into his stomach, and yet his vest has miraculously healed a few shots later? Amazing. His costume. There's been a really obvious absentee from the movies in which Hugh Jackman's Wolverine has appeared to date, and it's not a person, it's the character's iconic yellow costume from the comic books. So far, Wolverine has worn generic street clothes for the most part, although he did briefly wear a black leather ensemble as part of the X-Men team.
You actually go outside in these things?
But it's the yellow costume that fans would really like to see. It has appeared in a suitcase in a deleted scene from The Wolverine, but given that it didn't appear in the final movie, we can't count that, especially given that he didn't even wear it. The likelihood of Jackman ever putting on the yellow suit is now slim, and that's a real shame. They've totally overused him. A really huge problem with the Hollywood version of Wolverine is that he's been terribly overused. Ever since Hugh Jackman first appeared in the role in 2000's X-Men, Fox have done everything in their power to squeeze him in wherever possible. As a result, some far more interesting characters, and some characters that we'd just like to have seen more of, have lost out massively when it comes to screen time. It really feels like he's been rammed down our throats. Was the X-Men First Class cameo really necessary? Why was it Wolverine who was sent back in time in Days of Future Past? Was his appearance in X-Men Apocalypse really worth it? And how come he's had 2 titular solo movies, with another on the way, when no other character apart from Deadpool has had any? Frankly, we're quite pleased that 2017's Logan will be the last we see of him. Thanks for watching our video of 10 things Hollywood got wrong about Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Do you agree with the list, bub? What else is wrong with the live-action version of the mutant? Have your say in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more great videos like this one.